appreciated it that there are resources like webinars like this that would give practical tips, applicable tips and techniques that leaders can use in this disruption. We don't know what to do. Work from home setup suddenly became 5 days a week. And our topic today is closely related to this one. How do you now perform your functions as a manager and people leader, motivating and sustaining morale? That's our topic yesterday. And today is all about doing what most, if not all of you, love to do best. I've seen our list of organizations participating in today's workshop. We have our friends the from LJMB's usual network. We have our leaders from Inspiro, from RCBC Bankard, our friends from Revisco, SGSco, Asia Pacific Manila, Transcom, and our delegation from IBS Electronics, who I assume was also with us yesterday. We also have somebody who enrolled just this morning. Thank you for joining us. When we as people managers have already embraced our coaching function and our coaching responsibility, how do we now adapt our practices and behaviors in this new environment? We don't see our people. We only have video and audio to depend on. So let's see how we can really be better at adapting our coaching behaviors. Just an orientation on how we can better maximize the right side of your webinar jam screen. There are poll questions that we have prepared. We prepared two. We will also utilize the chat feature. I will ask questions. There are slides with titles when I will ask questions, and I would appreciate your quick response through chat, and I'll read them. At any point you also have questions or clarification to send, please do use our chat feature. Don't mind me. I will read it. I'll have time to refer to it. In the last 15 to 20 minutes of our session today, we will make sure we spend that on Q&A. And if there's also a few members of our class today who would like to share coaching practices that they have introduced in the past 4 weeks in this disruption, then we'd love to hear that. You may request to speak. Use that button as presented on our screen here. Okay. I will also do my best to jump from using the slides, which now occupy 95% of your screen, and you can see a one-by-one photo of me, video of me at the upper right-hand corner. I will also leave the slides momentarily on some occasions so that you can see a bigger video excerpt of me, and I can engage you more with my gestures and body language. When we hear the word coaching, we usually associate it with sports. And most of you have already been doing your coaching responsibilities for the longest time. Some have also been training leaders on how to do structured coaching. That I'd like you to go back to the olden times before sports became the milieu to use the word coach. The real use, one of the first uses of the word coach is to refer to this mode of transport to bring someone from A to B. It's a very good analogy because if you don't use a vehicle or you don't use a transport tool like this, you might still reach your destination. Any employee, any person who has a goal, a performance goal, or a dream or an ambition may still reach that. But it may take a lot of time, it will take a lot of effort, and there can be stumbling blocks along the way. And here you go, before the advent of cars and four-wheeled electric vehicles and gas-powered vehicles, you have the stagecoach, which can bring someone from point A, where you are right now, to point B, your destination, at the fastest time possible. And another way by which we can view our coaching responsibility is developing people so that they can also perform better. And you can see photos here in different areas, in different sports. You can see Manny Pacquiao of boxing here being coached by Freddie Roach. Who would Manny Pacquiao be if not for Coach Freddie Roach? And I believe among the coaches I'm showing here on the screen, Freddie Roach is more popular to our members of the audience. At the center is Jet Li, your actor and martial arts expert. On the upper right hand side of the screen, you can see popular Olympian swimmer Michael Phelps. And most of the people whom I ask, can you name the coach of these popular people, will have a hard time identifying or naming their coach. And that's also one of the things that is important in coaching. It is not the coach in the limelight, but it's more of the product of the coach or the coachee. That's the focus of the coaching process. And going out of sports, you can see basketball team there, and then Charis Pempenko on the lower left side of the screen here, the development role of people through powerful conversations that we leaders should continue to perform even during this time of disruption. What I'd like to emphasize here, this slide, is coaching is just one of three leader conversations. And before I proceed to leader conversations, now I'm jumping from the slide so that I can really, you can see a bigger photo of me. I'd like to emphasize the word conversation. That coaching and feedback, as I will mention later, is a relationship between the coach and the coachee. I, I need to emphasize this because in the business setup where leaders are asked to comply to coaching schedules or coaching metrics, some leaders may fail to see the point and just perform coaching as scheduled because my boss is asking for it, because it's in the performance management plan. And even if it's good to be complying to your organization's developmental routines, at the core of coaching is a conversation, a personal one between a manager and a direct report. I'll go back to our mentioning that coaching is just one of three leader conversations. In LJMB's structured coaching two-day workshop, we introduce that the leader actually has a toolbox composed of three conversations. And I'd like to take a quick look at what is provided here. There are three types of conversations that we engage in. The frequency may change, the nature and the focus is different. And I'm now looking at my chat box here. And my first question is, please identify what are the similarities and what are the differences among these conversations. I'm giving you a few seconds to encode your answer in our chat feature. Please chat with me. Please take a look at the similarities and the differences across the labels of the three leader conversations that you can see here. Waiting for the answers of a few. Looking at our chat room here. What do you see? What do you think? Very obvious on the screen. Just please highlight similarities and differences. Thank you. They both deal with improving performance. Thank you, Pearl, for this answer. Anyone else? If you can just pick up on the repeated words so we can compare the three leader conversations. There's another response here. Regularity and urgency. Waiting for maybe two more people to identify the obvious repetitions of words and key phrases. Okay. Different frequency and urgency. Okay. And you mentioned urgency and frequency. And thank you for three responses that I got here. Okay, I can also see here feedback is immediate and short term. Coaching is long term and has aspects of mentoring mixed in it. Okay, thank you. Your answers are all correct, and we will touch on that as we go along. I'd like you to look at the screen again, and I will encircle in the next slide the very obvious repeated terms in these three leader conversations. Okay? The first and the second conversation, what's common is that they're both happening real time, meaning on the spot. You see someone, let's say, dozing off in a teleconference or a video call. You give that person feedback through instant messaging. You send that person a note in Viber. That's real time giving feedback. Somebody reported, I can't do a certain task or a project that you assigned to him, and mentioned that he doesn't know how to operate aspects of the system. That's a chance for you to do on the spot or real time coaching to transfer KS. And what is KS? Knowledge or skill. So the first two conversations both happen on the spot as you see things happen and occur. The leader introduces a specific conversation. The second and third conversation, what's common is that they're both coaching. But you can see two types of coaching here. One is real-time coaching. One is monthly coaching. The real-time coaching is the more frequent one as people report deficiencies or gaps in competencies and knowledge or skill. When they say, I'm having a hard time creating this report, you come in, you may drop what you're doing and provide assistance and guidance. The monthly coaching on the third conversation is your more frequent performance review. And you talk about scorecards, you talk about numbers. In the next slide, we will differentiate that feedback is more one way and focuses often, if not all the time, on specific behavioral issues. I mentioned maybe a team member may be always late in your video calls or team meetings during this lockdown. As soon as you observe that behavior, don't wait for it to be a habit. Schedule a feedback session on the spot, immediate one. If you talk about knowledge and skill gaps or lack of, that's the second conversation, real-time coaching to transfer knowledge and skills. And when you want to discuss KPIs or key performance indicators, numbers, productivity, timeliness, and quality, and where you're showing dashboards, you monitored somebody's performance in a span of 1 month, that's the last one, monthly coaching to ensure consistent performance. This is not the session wherein we will introduce to you acronyms or structures for each one, because our focus here is whatever structure or acronym or model that you're using, you will be able to adapt using our tips in virtual coaching. Remember, the three conversations are different. Sometimes you give feedback, it's one way, but monthly coaching is more two-way because you want to know what the root cause is, why the person did not meet certain KPIs. And yes, indeed, even in this time of disruption and work from home, we need to have metrics that will show whether our people are productive and continuously contributing to team achievement. Before we proceed to these leader conversations, there are 5 prerequisites that need to happen. And I'd like to engage the group again. Use your chat feature, please. I am presenting these 5 prerequisites. If you notice, the first word starts with right, but I kept the second word blank there, giving only the first letter of each of the second words. Guess what the missing keywords are? Please encode the number and then provide the missing keyword. You have the first letter to cue you or to serve as a clue. Let's see who will get this all 5 correct. You may encode one answer at a time, or you may encode all 5 answers in one chat message. I'll give you a few seconds to provide some of the answers. Please guess, what are these right prerequisites in leader conversations? Give me your best guess. Some are related to mindsets of leaders. Some are related to the physical environment. I can see 2 responses here. It's easy or easier to get the answers for items 4 and 5. Perfect. Waiting for some more answers. What do the others think? More answers coming in for number 4. I think that's the easiest to guess. And number 5 might be the next easier item to guess. Waiting for some more answers. What about? Okay, we have an answer for number 1. Okay, somebody said the number 1 is situation. Okay, good try. Okay. Okay, number 1. Somebody said the setting. Okay. Setting and situation. We have right time for number 4, as others have guessed. We are now guessing resources for number 2. Okay. For number 3, somebody said right state of mind. Okay. Seems like a perfect fit because you have SOM. Okay. Right setting, and now showing the correct answers. Okay. Give you a few seconds to develop that element of suspense. Dun, 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 dun. Let's go and present the right answers. Yep. 5 prerequisites in leader conversations before you even engage somebody in any of those feedback, knowledge and skill transfer, or your monthly coaching. Make sure that you have 5 prerequisites in place. Let's talk about number 1, right structure, or the other word there is flow. And because without the right structure, if you're not using any structure, if you're not using any model, then the coaching can just be hit and miss. And both you and the coachee may feel that there's lack of direction in the conversation. What's number 2? Somebody guessed it correctly. Right reason for coaching. And this is an emphasis to the purpose of coaching that should be coachee-centered. It's not what the coach wants to accomplish in a feedback or coaching session. It's where we want to bring the person aligned with his or her developmental goals. Also, I have to talk about right reason because in the course of my career, I've also met a few leaders who may want to open a coaching conversation, but the greater focus of the discussion is more about his or her achievements and accomplishments. No? I remember one leader before would say, come on, let's get into a coaching conversation. And then we'll end up saying, okay, this is what I've done before. Look at my achievements before. This is how I would always do things. And while leaders are mentors who can freely share experiences on what they did right and wrong in the past, if you take a look at the airtime, especially in coaching, it should be 80% more the person or the coachee talking and only 20% airtime of the coach. Number 3 is right state of mind, because you may have the right reason. I'm concerned with the person's development. I want to help. I want to correct and prevent behavior. But the right state of mind is not there. You've just been in a tough meeting, intensely heated conversation, or you may have this temporary dislike of a person because he did not submit the output that you're requesting this morning and you have a scheduled session in the afternoon, not the right state of mind. Right time, as most of you have correctly guessed, has something to do with scheduling and the duration of the sessions. Right place for Asians and Filipinos, especially, who are very sensitive or who can be very sensitive in receiving feedback or in receiving any form of criticism, whether you call it constructive criticism. The right place is important. Let me put some words under each one. And again, you will get an e-handout that will include the highlights of this session. And these prerequisites, as some of you may have already experienced, are true for pre-COVID days. Right structure, I'm going to talk a lot about the GROW model, or I have a slide here on the GROW model. Okay? The right reason, I have the words here that I would love to use. It's to correct and prevent. And you can always use that, especially when you get into tough moments in the coaching. You can tell the person, I just want to, or my purpose is to be able to correct and prevent a similar occurrence. Right state of mind, more rational, more objective. Right time, as we say, before COVID, give feedback and coaching immediately. And you're accustomed more to the duration of 30 minutes to 1 hour. Right place. Some of you may have already heard of PIP RIP. And what is PIP RIP here? Praise in public, reprimand in private. And these prerequisites have been true for face-to-face conversations in our pre-COVID days. Now, I'd like to ask the group, if you take a look at these 5 prerequisites, applicable in face-to-face pre-COVID, when you schedule, you book a room, a conference room, or you conduct it in the workstation of leaders and try to tone down your voices so you're not heard by everyone else in this COVID moment. Which of these prerequisites are still applicable? I'll go back to that question later, but for now, just promoting one of my more favorite coaching models or structures or coaching flow. And I'm sure that depending on your organization, if you're a global organization, you may be using a standard framework that all countries or all business units are following. One of my favorite models because of its simplicity is the GROW model proposed by John Whitmore. You can see the cover of the book that he wrote. The title is Coaching for Performance. And GROW essentially represents 4 steps, starting with set the goal, realities about assess the gap and the root cause. O is explore options and solutions on how to close the gap between reality and goal. And W can stand for wrapping up the coaching session by agreeing on the way forward or the action plan. And to also check for the another W, willingness of the person to commit and implement the action plan. There you go. You have an example of a right structure. There are a lot of other tools promoted by different organizations. So should your organization be fixed on one, continue using it. If you don't have anything else, if you're not using a framework, you may further explore GROW. There's a lot of resources available in the internet and in YouTube. And you may also refer to that book, Coaching for Performance. Okay. Let me go to which one do you think is still applicable? It's no longer a poll question, but we're going back to the chat room here. Which do you think of the 5 is still applicable during COVID, during this lockdown, during virtual and remote teams? Just please encode your number, chat with me, send the number of the prerequisite that you think is still very applicable in virtual coaching. You can type as many numbers as you can see. Okay, right reason is still applicable. Having the sincere desire to help somebody doesn't know before or during COVID. Should be a consistent need for the team leader. Somebody said four, right timing. Four, observing right timing. Somebody said one, having the right structure. Because again, if you don't use any structure, just like more than 15 years ago, leaders, especially when the coaching trend happened here in the Philippines, and leaders do not have any coaching flow framework or model to use, coaching just became a quick chit chat of, hi, how are you? Look at your target. You're very far from your goal. What do we do? And the coach just says, sorry, I missed it. Can you give me another chance? And then the leader, without probing for root causes, will just say, I expect that from you. So promises to improve and to correct behavior without root cause analysis and action planning will all be in vain. Right? So 2 to 5 are still applicable. All are still relevant. Thank you. Let me go to what I think. With the checks here, I put a check on what is hands down still applicable in this virtual, remote, or work from home setup. We still need the structure. Use whatever you know you've been trained on. Right reason, you don't lose that sight because you'll always go back to that concern to correct and prevent, and people will appreciate that. Right state of mind, always keep that level of rationality. I'd like to use myself as an example. You know, as a business leader, as a top leader, I'm currently, and I've always been subject to a lot of business, team, and people pressures. And I'm a very good example of I have to have this habit of checking my emotions before I go to the next conversation, fearing that I will bring whatever frustration I have talking to another person to somebody who will be helpless, who doesn't deserve my emotional display of anger, emotional expression. Right place, we have to also consider pip rip, but in the context of you have to make the person that you're talking to, he's working from home, be in the right place in his household when he or she will not feel embarrassed that he's being given feedback. And even if members of the household will not be hearing your exact conversation, you know, it's really uncomfortable if there are people around you when you are into a tough conversation, even when they cannot hear it. What's the reason why I encircled the words on the right time? In giving feedback, we say give feedback immediately. When it comes to duration, it's 30 minutes to 1 hour. The adjustment that we need to make here is your feedback may have to wait. As compared to when you're in the office and you just need to turn your chair around and you can quickly invite somebody to go to a conference room, or if nobody else is around, you can just give your feedback, shoot it away, help the person discover, become aware of one's lapse. In virtual or remote setting, it might be difficult to reach the person who is also in a series of meetings or in back-to-back calls. It may not be feasible or possible to give immediate feedback. So you just have to be more patient and wait for that right opportunity. You don't know what's happening in the person's household, okay? And you don't know the realities, additional realities, personal realities that are compounding that person's work from home situation. If personally, my deadline before is to give feedback within 24 hours, now let's be ready to push that, let's say 2 days, 3 days, or within the week. For the duration of coaching, from 30 minutes to 1 hour, now you have to sense whether the person that you're talking to can really last for long video calls or telephone conversations on tough topics, especially if the coaching has to deal with undesirable performance. 30 minutes is tops. 1 hour might be quite challenging. You may have to really have a hard stop at the 1 hour. Or how do you utilize review of documentation before the coaching session? You may need to send a lot of readings for the person or documented critical incidents for the person to review. So the coaching conversation, the call or the video call is just focused on GROW if you're using Grow. I like it that one of our participants here mentioned, Pearl mentioned that we have times during this COVID that we have a daily leadership call. We have escalations from clients that need to be discussed with the team immediately after the call. Let's keep the principle there immediately, but you just have to become more patient that some people are not that reachable in this virtual or work from home setup. Still, it's best if we're able to pass on the information, create awareness, and spring people to action at the fastest time possible. Now let's talk about the use of the right tools. And thanks for that comment. Anybody who has something to share, suggestion, you may even have questions on what I'm sharing or clarification, just feel free to send your chat messages here and I'm able to see them and will acknowledge them right away. Now, you're using your smartphone there. I know that aside from your iPad or your laptop, this can be a very handy tool for coaching. Your phone is already enabled to perform all of these functions that we can see on the screen. Okay? And I'm going to the poll feature because these are also the 5 things that we have as options. Wow, we have a group that's split somehow close to equally split in choosing our 5 options here. We have 20% of our attendees choosing SMS and text. They say they prefer to use more often in virtual coaching. We have 20% of our attendees preferring to use Viber, WhatsApp, or any other form of internal instant messaging. We have 20% of the group saying we'd prefer audio calls. No? Well, not video, not wanting to see the body language of the person, but dependent on the voice. One obvious savings here would be data, internet, and corresponding cost savings. 26%, slightly higher than the rest, would prefer video calls, and 13% would prefer emails. So we have how many attendees? We have 18 attendees now, and almost 20%, but the winner, slightly higher than the others, would be choosing video calls. Okay? And yes, Pearl, you're correct because, wow, I like it. Um, I like it that an organization that Pearl is representing is subsidizing for employees internet and electricity. Pearl, I even used the word subsidize. I know that you might be paying for them 100%. Therefore, we expect them to be contactable during their shift, and that the organization is making sure that everybody has instant access, but may not be the same for everyone else. Okay? So we're looking at all of this, and you may have your reasons for choosing, and please go ahead and chat with me. What was your basis for preferring to use SMS often? Why would you say, I prefer to reach out to my team member using Viber or using emails for coaching, audio calls, and video calls? They all can be useful tools. I'd like to hear from you. Please chat with me. What is your reason? What's the benefit? What's the advantage of using your most preferred tool? Waiting for a few answers. Can be quick one-liners. Why would you prefer SMS? What's the advantage for you? Maybe you're saying what works for me works for me. And yes, that's correct. May not work for others. But what works for you and your team, if you have some success using these tools, then continue using your preferred tool. who has a one-liner for us. Would you prefer video calls? Why would you go for emails? And if the question here is most preferred to use, I did not ask the question least preferred, so you have a reason why. Okay. Easier and faster if it's video call. Some employees are still using the call and text mobile phones. Interested to hear why some would choose email as their preferred forms. Okay, we'll just acknowledge the responses as we go along. Yes, please feel free to send them. Regular messaging, okay, we use Teams messaging. It's easier to respond to. Video calls are more personal. Now you're mentioning that component in the relationship. Oh, there's several audio call options, and you're correct. Your IM also has a capacity or feature to reach out to others using audio or video calls. My experience is that I also find Viber, the quality of audio in Viber better than the normal call. Okay? SMS, text, and email, there's a point here by Ravian, can always look back to feedback and tips because it's documented. You can always review it and refer to it as compared to video or audio calls. If people are not taking notes, they might say yes. They may have the pressure to say yes to their immediate superior. They totally forget about it during or after the call, and they may need to reach out to you another time. Okay? Thank you. The responses are coming in. Let me now present. This was the question that I asked. The advantage of using these tools. Very quick on this slide. Could be cost effective in terms of being able to reach people. Okay? Time savings as well if used effectively. Okay? The effort, reduced effort because you're riding on technology, and the accessibility of the so many tools that we can use. Now I'm leaving this slide so we can jump quickly to using the terms asynchronous, and I know my one by one video screen there is covering this word. I'll just say it out loud. Synchronous tools. Asynchronous, the parties which are in communication are not in the same, are not receiving the messages at the same time, are not replying to it at the same time. Synchronous means that both the sender and receiver of communication are actively present in the use of the tool. And having said this, there are advantages and disadvantages in using each. So for those who said we prefer SMS and text, those who said we prefer messages to instant messaging, let's exclude the use of calls there, or those who would like to utilize email for communication, there are 4 things that would reinforce the benefits that you see. Number 1, if you do not expect, require, or need an immediate reply, because these tools are asynchronous, the other person might still be sleeping or has not opened one's email. If you don't expect an immediate reply, you may use them. If the discussion is not expected to be emotional or tense, you're not expecting a difficult conversation, then you may just shoot an SMS or just give a coaching instruction. If it's just about giving directions, the other person is open to receiving it, go ahead, please. If the topic is not sensitive and the topic is not complicated, there are 2 things here. Sensitive. What is a sensitive topic that we will cover through coaching? Performance discussions, especially when people are not meeting expectations. If it's a behavioral issue and you anticipate that the person will immediately say, no, that's not true, you're taking it personally, why is it always me? If the topic, the conversation, the response of the person will be sensitive, please avoid using this. And if you're doing coaching, transfer of knowledge and skill, and the topic is not complicated, you might even send screenshots and send it through SMS, Viber, or email? Yes, please depend on them. And one more, if the topic is emotional, sensitive, but you already have an established relationship with the person, and somehow with your history with this person, you know that the person can pick it up, or the person will not take it against you if you've been very honest in the choice of words, you may use these asynchronous tools. But I would prefer, it's still best to use, while I might send the message through Viber or through email, I'll make sure to follow it up or to reinforce it with the synchronous tools. When I need an immediate reply, I'll definitely call. If you send an email and then get angry at your team members because they did not reply promptly, it is the leader's fault. You have to use the right tool. If the discussion is expected to be emotional, if you know that the person, when I say emotional, doesn't mean that the person will cry. It could be that the person could just give a resistance expression, that the person will have a hard time agreeing to your proposal or to your observation. If the topic, let's say, is sensitive, if the topic is something to do with change of roles and responsibilities, especially during these COVID times, and when you do not know the other person well, it is best to call and hear the voice of that person, and we'll say more about that later, or it's best to really see people in action. Now, the choice between audio call and video call can now be can now boil down to the question: will body language, will seeing facial expression, gestures, and will getting eye contact from the other person distract you or not? If you say yes, then you better go audio. If you say no, then you can use video calls. Again, at any point, you have any suggestion, please keep them coming. You have anything to add or any question, please do interrupt me using chat. Okay? So having given that overview of email, SMS, and instant messaging, and audio calls and video calls, you now see that you have 5 options. Not one, not three, but 5 options. Nothing is stopping us from really having those daily and more frequent conversations with our team members. It's just that, as mentioned, here are some of the advantages and disadvantages of coaching through email. The point here of requiring the right choice of words is shared by email, instant messaging, and texting. I have a good example in the upcoming slide here. Okay? And even when you use email and text and Viber, especially email, I believe it needs to be supported with an audio or a video call for greater clarity. Before coaching, the best use of email is to be able to send documents. Please review the following. If you have a documentation of the person's behavior, if you have some numbers for him to analyze, you may want the person to even have his own self-assessment. That's what we do in the LJMB team. We have an end of month practice, end of month assessment or feedback or performance review. There's a standard form that we use. So before the coaching session, they fill that out. They send that to the immediate superior. So the superior knows the person's self-assessment even before they meet. And the use of the email could be best for sending documentation. What's the action plan? What's the commitment? And then, of course, if it's a transfer of skill or knowledge issue, send links to resources, YouTube, articles, manuals, internal documents, and the person can also ask follow-up questions. For those of you who were in the motivation session yesterday, one of the participants sent me a question through chat, and I felt that desire to respond through email, so I got in touch with this person through email because I felt that there's more information this person could share as context. And indeed, we had the back and forth of emails, and he was able to share to the rest of his team. Look at that, the use of email for coaching. Choice of words matter most, especially when you're sending text messages. Why? Emails, more professional, But SMS and instant messages, they have more or greater sense of personal touch. So be careful of the words. I will show you a sample text message. Let's look at the sample text message. Let's say you get this. Either you place yourself in the shoes of the person who received this, okay? Or you saw your peer, a fellow leader, send this to his or her direct report. I'll read this out loud. You've been ignoring my messages, and that could happen in this COVID work from home setup. As I have been mentioning in our previous webinars, the flexibility of allowing people some elbow room to participate in what needs to be done in the house, although you have a strict routine or schedule. But continuing with really rude of you to do that, unacceptable and unprofessional, are you really testing my patience? I think this leader, maybe it's the behavior is recurring and it really got to the nerves of this manager. My question to you now, and you can encode this through chat. If it were you, and you have the right to be angry, you have the right to be frustrated or irritated, what would be a good choice of words? What words will you use to still call out and give feedback to this person? Of course, this might be the thought bubble. While waiting for others to give me their choice of words, this is what's really in your head because you're angry. You've been waiting for a reply and you can't make a decision. But choice of words are important in virtual coaching, especially in the use of asynchronous communication. Could there be one or two of you who would like to give me their, some would say positive scripting? But what I don't like with the sound of positive scripting is if it loses the meaning or the essence of what you want to say. You still want to call out the person, how would you do it? Waiting for a few seconds. If there's none, I'll show an alternative way of calling this behavior out. If you will change the wordings in this message, how would you call out a person who's been ignoring your messages? If you will improve on the choice of words here, how would you call this employee out? You sent, let's say you sent 4 messages that morning, you didn't get a reply. But let's say you're monitoring other Viber groups or WhatsApp groups that you're also a member of. This person might reply to others. You may have missed my messages. That could be the intro. Okay? Not judging, not assuming, giving the person the benefit of the doubt. Okay? Maybe the others are also encoding here. Let me show an alternative. Okay, I'd like it that Josie said, is everything okay? On top of what the Chow said, you may have missed my messages. I like it, Josie, that you ask, is everything okay? Because that also communicates your care and concern for the employee. You can start with that. And of course, continue to calling out the person, and this is feedback. Okay? It's been 4 hours. I have not received a reply. You're very specific with 4 messages. I also tried to call you, but you can't be reached. I like it better that we're aligned here. Please do call me soonest or reply. Need your input to make a decision. Okay? Doesn't have to be long, but if you notice, it's easy to send a negative message. Negative messages are often shorter because they're full of adjectives or labels. If you try to focus on behavior, that might require, yes, you will think through it. What is the right wording that I will send? Acknowledging the 2 general challenges in virtual coaching. I place a check on infrastructure because I don't want to overemphasize this as of this point. If you don't have the infrastructure, if you don't have stable internet, video calls, even normal audio calls can be very frustrating. And now the skills of all of our coaches here that we're trying to level up through the use of our additional tips. And I'll continue to go through our tips. Okay. Let's talk about coaching through telephone. Some would prefer just hearing voices. And you know, what's powerful about this is that when you talk to somebody over the phone without the element of the body language, and I've also spoken to several people who can attest to this, it increases our desire to really visualize and listen effectively and carefully. And if you're speaking over the phone, you're giving coaching, you have to invest not just in the choice of words, but in the vocal delivery. Right volume, right pacing, what else? The intonation and the inflection, making sure that you put the right emphasis on the words that you would like to really give more importance to. And the benefit of just hearing voices only and not seeing body language over the call is that it really makes you capture those verbal and vocal cues. And that's why it's really frustrating and it will be very difficult if there are internet lags or signal problems. So you have to work with your teammates to really find the best spot in the house when coaching or difficult conversations will not be interrupted. What are some samples of these vocal cues? As you can see on the slide, every pause, every time the person pauses to breathe, there could be something there that you want to probe. Or when you hear a sigh of relief, the usual hi, let's say you're delegating a task, or you are probing with the person the root cause also of a certain behavior. The paralanguage, the us, the fillers. If you happen to hear frequent fillers from somebody, when you are coaching on knowledge and skills and you're asking, trying to assess what the person knows, maybe the fillers pertain to lack of confidence. Now, what's good about this is that your mind will really be tested on how well you can visualize, trying to pick up unseen body language. And you know that when people are smiling, even if you don't see the smiles, you somehow, the tone of voice, you can pick it up, you know whether the person's happy or there's a heavy feeling there. Noise in the background, no, can also communicate that it may not be a good time to coach and you would need to reschedule. For example, if you have overextended meetings, if your meetings are going past 6 o'clock and you hear, let's say, the sound of utensils on the background, or you hear their kids already talking to them, that means, oops, you might be using some of their personal time. So you may have to set expectations, or you may have to ask whether it's a good time to continue coaching. Moving to video calls, it's not just words, it's not just voice, but the advantage here or the disadvantage could be body language. As you can see on the second bullet, the body language can provide that visual context. Let's just try it. If I will just remove the slides here, it's the presentation. That means you can see my one by one photo there enlarged, and you have better access to my facial expression. And I'm trying to look at the camera now, trying to just to make you feel my smile can easily be picked up, my frown. If you have this wrinkle here, that means that you often use that as an immediate response to people. Or if you're thinking, you have a tendency to touch your face when you ask, oh, what is the root cause? Why have you been doing this? Can you make me understand why? And you touch your nose and you touch your face, can communicate and convey lack of trust, or you're tentative, or you're analyzing what the person is saying. And I'll also touch on this later. Um, Multitasking and lack of focus can also be immediately picked up using video calls. No? If you're doing something Person can see your eyes are on another screen, or maybe you're using your other gadget. So it really requires video calls. If you go for video calls, make sure that you leverage on the visual that you have in front of. Moving on, that visual body language can also be a distraction. I'll say more about that. But the good thing about using video calls, if you are the coach, is that you can also monitor your own facial expression. Although it takes mastery and practice to be able to catch yourself, especially in tough conversations when the person's pushing back. You may have experienced times when person's more agitated and highly emotional, leads to raised voices. Okay? The skill of being able to look at, such as what I'm looking right now, I'm looking at my face. You can monitor your facial expression, and best if you can have a sometimes a poker faced expression, sometimes an expression of concern matching the tone or the topic of the conversation. Continuing what we're emphasizing on video calls, one advantage, okay, is if you are in video calls, you may also avoid looking at the visual of the person if you don't want to be overwhelmed by face-to-face distractions. Okay? And this also leads the leader to have a self-assessment. Is my body language intimidating others? What is it that you're doing? What in your face? Is it the lack of smiling? Is it the manner by which you establish eye contact? Is it your frequent active gestures that can be distracting or intimidating to people? Or is it your voice? And you will agree with me, even if you're in video calls at times when you have to think, you have to remove your gaze away from the camera, especially if you're analyzing things or preparing what to say. The good thing is that, according to studies in journals of psychology, the British Journal of Psychology published in 2009, there was a study that found out that there's no difference in the level of problem resolution for face-to-face conversations and even virtual conversations, audio and video. And it also highlighted the fact that the coaching experience may be better. Now, this is something that you may have to adapt to your situation. It actually could be better when there is no need for eye contact. And you have to check with your teammates. You have to check, do your self-assessment. Is my body language helping people appreciate my message more? Or do they pay attention more on how you look and not listen anymore to what you say? Now, what's good about video calls is that you may really base your actions on body language that you're seeing. You may want to repeat questions during video lags. It's impossible to do during audio calls, no? Because you may have been talking for 1 minute or two or even more, and the other person has already not received what you've mentioned. In video, you can immediately pick that up because you will see that the person suddenly froze on the screen. And what's good is that you can use other tools while you're talking to somebody using your phone. You can use your laptop or your gadgets, your iPads to reinforce, to send messages and notices through Viber. Okay? In coaching based on knowledge skill transfer, you can also send documents and visual aids. And that's what's good about video calls. You can monitor whether the person is having difficulty, and you can resort to other options. If you're using web conferencing tools, our favorite in LJMB would be Google Hangouts Meet, because it's very easy to just log in. You can log in a few seconds, and you can also easily screen share, send or just share your dashboards, your scorecards, and use Viber on the side for sending documents apart from email. Okay? But the skill involved here in using web conferencing tools is to be able to effectively transition from screen to video. You know how I would really love that our future webinars will feature me standing. You can see my half body, and I could have a flip chart here. I'll figure out a way of doing that. We have a flip chart here, so I can transition from slides to writing on the flip charts. But that's the additional skill that I'm mentioning here, because I have to go close to my gadget to press next, and then I have to step back. So requires some mastery of the technology as well with the buttons to press if you are in web conferencing. Now it's 2:02. I said we'll give 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A. The last batch of the last topic that I'd like to share will be principles that remain the same, whether it's face-to-face or virtual coaching. Look at this. The topic is virtual coaching. We gave 3 leader conversations. We said the 5 prerequisites, most of them are still applicable with some tweaks that you can do. We went into the strengths of asynchronous and synchronous coaching feedback tools. But I'm bringing you back with the principles that are applicable whether you're doing live, face-to-face, the person's beside you, or you're using phone or video. And using effective acronyms, just remember 8 principles that will be captured by 6 letters: CSR and PAD. Very easy to remember. You have your customer service representative, CSR, who's using a PAD. Okay? Let's start with the first principle. It's a conversation. Virtual coaching is a conversation. I established this point earlier in our webinar. Do not forget, it is not just information download. The person has to participate. It's easier to give information. It's easier to get a yes, but have you really connected with the person? Did the person feel he was part of the conversation? So it's a matter of rule, 80-20 on the third check bullet here. 80% of the time, the coachee must be talking. With 20% of the time, the coach is moderating or facilitating. The best coaches, if you have a 30-minute conversation, 80% of that is 24 minutes. 24 minutes, the coachee is talking. I know that you're trying to imagine that, because more often than not, it's the leader who drives the conversation. The best coach, the most effective coach, is the one who asks questions. And because you're only asking questions, you can actually use GROW, GROW, using questions. I'll go back to the second bullet. Agree on the medium. Agree on the medium means call or Viber or email or video calls. I like it that Pearl said that in her organization, they're able to subsidize internet. But for organizations without such assistance and people are constrained on their resources, this rule becomes important, agreeing on the medium. I have some team members who are saying they're trying to budget their internet subscription or their LTE data, and that for some conversations, we can use calls instead of going to Google Hangouts. It's a conversation where the leader has to ask more questions, know when to interrupt, and know when the person has ended talking. We have some rules that we gave in our facilitation of telephone conversations on interrupting people. Okay? We're now going to S. C is about conversation or connection. S is about structure. GROW, as I mentioned, is something I'll promote. Whatever coaching tool you're having, whatever acronym you're using, go ahead as long as you have that sense of direction. And even if your coachee can predict, oh, he already asked for my goal, he will ask for the reality or the gap, he will ask the root causes, it's okay. Because that means the person, the coachee, can even help you prepare for the coaching conversation. If you also have a structure, you'll be able to manage the time, and you don't have to rush at the end, especially when you're doing the action planning. Take a look at the tip here. It's ending 5 minutes before the set end time and providing time for reactions. I love asking people at the end of calls or conversations, okay, what do you like most in this conversation? What was your major takeaway in this coaching session? Even when the coaching is officially ended, and even when, especially when there's strong emotions, okay? You may even ask if there could be tense moments in the coaching. You can ask, do you think we need a second call later to just address the emotion part? And if the person says yes, then it's a chance for you to leave that heated conversation and then transition later into ways of moving forward. CSR. Now you go to rapport. Rapport, then building relationship. Okay? Check in with the person before you proceed and say, hey, good morning, welcome to our coaching session. Check in means asking personalized questions first. Okay? And the person knows that your business is really coaching, but it's important to ask, how are you? Avoid asking how are you. Ask something more specific. How's your morning been? What's the highlight of your morning earlier today? Connection first before contribution, as John Maxwell would emphasize. Another R, two words on R, is the regularity of virtual coaching. When we don't see people, there's a tendency to forget. Well, you can say out of sight, out of mind. So if you want to have coaching as a continued practice over this COVID lockdown, formalize it, set the frequency. What is the fixed schedule so people don't have to ask what days are coaching again? If he knows it always happens on Wednesdays at 2 p.m., then the person will develop that habit. And as I mentioned, your 30 minutes to 1 hour, you would need to practice more patience and flexibility and considering the realities, the possible craziness, and competing demands that the person also has in his or her household. Don't want to belabor the point here. This is the start of PAD, the preparation. You don't rush to coaching without looking at numbers or preparing your questions, reviewing critical incidents, and also writing down your talking points. What would be anticipation of risks? Take a look at what time are you having the conversation. Is it a good time to schedule it, even if it has always been the habitual schedule? Another risk could be if it's a potentially difficult discussion because there's feedback that you want to share that the person may immediately resist. Write the risk down and go back to preparing your talking points. The A in PAD is the main reason why you should not multitask, especially when it's a video call. And even if it's an audio call, even if the person can't see you, because the person is responding and there's silence, and then all of a sudden you'll ask the person to repeat what he mentioned. Drop everything, minimize disruptions and interruptions. Be careful as well if you're encoding the action plan, documenting the coaching session, and your vigorous typing is being heard on the background. Okay? So for disruptions and interruptions to be avoided, especially at the side of the employee, you may also check in with the employee or check with the employee if the schedule is a best time for him. There might be some special errands that are assigned to that employee on that time. Okay? Ensure supportive lighting, audio quality and background, especially with the use of video, because you don't want to have people in video and you don't see a face. What you see is something blurred or you see something dark, and it could also happen to you in your case as a coach. This is a simple video call etiquette. There are two things here on D. Your D in PAD is the documentation. Some managers may miss on the documentation, thinking that the conversation in itself has enough power to make people work on their productivity or improve their timeliness or improve their team player behavior, especially during this work from home setup. And the follow through, the documentation is one thing, but what's put in the documentation has to be followed through. Did people deliver the commitments that they have? Did they really study, invest more time in uh, working on their skill gaps? Did they perform the action plan as promised and as committed during the coaching? So as a view of those 8 principles in coaching, same whether in face-to-face, and even becomes more important in virtual coaching. You have focus on conversation, the need for structure, rapport first before work related, the regularity, so it becomes a habit, the preparation from the coach, and using self-assessments can also enable the coachee to prepare, the focus and attention to give respect and dignity to the coachee, and the documentation and delivery. Which of these principles in CSR pad did you like most? I'm going to another poll question. The 8 principles are now being published on your poll feature. Which one? I know that you may have one or two or three. Which one did you like most from our CSR pad coaching principles? Please feel free to vote. Which one did you like most from among the CSR pad principles? Go to the poll feature of your webinar jam. Not seeing any votes yet. Okay. Now people are choosing structure, regularity, especially during this work from home setup. People may think I can get away with the coaching schedule. Okay. The delivery of commitments as now having the most vote. I can also see people voting for rapport first, but not the usual rapport of how are you. We should drop that. We need to ask more specific, personalized questions. And how's your mom? I heard he got sick yesterday. How are the kids doing so far? How's your wife? And you may ask questions about the spouse or partner's company practices during this time of COVID. So now everybody's voted. Then yes, we have as the highest rapport and delivery, the focus on establishing that emotional connection first. You don't know what people are going through. They may have challenges today that they may not have tomorrow. And we have more votes now on rapport. Some are saying delivery of commitments. Some have mentioned preparation and attention. So far, the leading answer is rapport, followed by delivery, then structure, regularity, preparation, and attention. With 15 minutes to go, we have time for interaction from the group. What we can do is for you to post questions in the chat feature or post what you consider as your biggest takeaway from this webinar. Or you may want to speak and address the group. If you want to speak, just request to speak and I'll acknowledge you. I'll give you 1 minute to either share your coaching structure in your organization and some coaching practices that you also found helpful during this time of the lockdown. I asked for 3 requests there. Let me recap. I will stop my slides now so you can see a bigger picture of Louis Banta. Okay. 3 requests, questions on chat, or your biggest takeaway from this webinar, or you may want to speak, and I will acknowledge you. Will give you an airtime of 1 minute per person, and you can have as many as possible. Waiting for some questions here in the chat room, or anybody who wants to share our coaching practice, or we've been using this coaching structure. We have 13 minutes for some participation from our classmates. How do we apply all of this in team coaching? Okay? Great question, Pearl. And my immediate reaction to that is to first identify in what situations do we do team coaching, and in what situations is it best to just limit it to one-on-one coaching. While we're waiting for either a request to speak or waiting for questions, or what's your biggest takeaway that you can place on the chat room, let me spend some more time on explaining my answer here. When is it best to do team coaching? When there's really a common need that everyone in the team or a big chunk of your team would need to address. For example, it's a skill issue, then it can become a formal learning session. What are instances when team coaching could be discouraged? I would often joke that the Filipino manager or the Asian manager, I will focus on Filipino and Asian because we have this trait of not being confrontational. We don't want conflict. We want to have less conflict as much as possible. We can avoid it, we will avoid it as compared to other cultures. One of the Filipino or Asian manager style is to call the entire team when they just want to speak to one person. And you'll agree with me that happens, yes? They just want to address the behavior issue of one person, but they end up calling everybody. And as you mention the behavioral issue when everybody's present, what's going on in their heads, that's not me, that's somebody else. And it ends up as nobody taking responsibility. But let's say that you really have a valid need, valid reason why you have to get everybody in team coaching. How do we apply all of this? That could be a long answer based on the slides. Let's go back to our presentation. Flash the slides again. CSR pad. It will just take some more effort for the leader because you're engaging not just one, maybe two or three or five more in the conversation. No problem in structure there, but building rapport with several people, you may not be able to do that if you have a lot of team members in the video call, but touch on top three, the magic number of three. Three people whom you need to engage as you build rapport. So when you say, good morning, welcome to our team coaching. Before we start, just want to ask three specific people, how's your day going so far? And as you go from one weekly meeting to another, you rotate that and make sure that everybody has airtime over a period of 2 to 3 weekly meetings. Go through each one of these principles. Attention, the more people you have to focus on, and therefore, if it's a team coaching session, Pearl, it already becomes the leader's skill of facilitating the meeting already becomes critical, because you have to tune out one and listen to the other. You have to give airtime to one and possibly interrupt the other. So the leader is not only team coach, but also becomes a meeting facilitator. Okay? I can say more in a private conversation that a private message that I can send to you. Checha's takeaway is video call coaching, still adjusting to it. Once again, do you want to see the person, or will seeing the person just intimidate you or distract you? And while waiting for other questions, what about you? You can chat with me. Do you want video or do you want audio? If we only have two choices, audio call or video call, you may chat with me, say audio, and just mention why. You may say video. Josie, this is on connection. It's important to establish a solid relationship with your coachee so you can leverage on it when it's time to coach. Jumping from what you said, Josie, how were your relationships with your coaches pre-COVID? I'll start slide presentation so you can see me in a bigger portion of your screen. How is your connection, your rapport and relationship with your employees before COVID? Because even after finishing this webinar and you'll apply the principles, if you have strained relationships with your employees before, you may need to work on trust building. You may need to do some repair work on the relationship aspect first, because they might be saying that you're just more frequent now in coaching because your boss is asking you to do so, or because you attended a recent seminar or webinar. They need to feel that coaching is not because of you complying to certain organizational responsibilities, but you are in that conversation because of your genuine care and concern to them. Let me go to chat room for other questions. Yes, I like it. The relationship factor. Because no amount of grow or model or framework, no amount of principles will work if you have had the history already. And maybe employees will say, before I don't even receive regular coaching, and all of a sudden you practice this principle of regularity. What you can do is, right after this webinar, if your coaching was not as regular as before, and you want to set the tone, given that this lockdown is, well, not sure when this will end, and it can be another month or two, and we want to become a better coach, set the expectation tomorrow. Friday is the day tomorrow. There's no better time to set expectations of what's happening the following week. You may need to call for a team huddle tomorrow. Gladys mentioned, I prefer video call since I am new with the company and need to build a good relationship with my team members. Gladys, you have a wonderful opportunity going on here. You want to get to know others. You want them to get to know you as well. You have to be careful with body language and how you're perceived over video. If you want them to see you and they don't know you yet, invest in building positive first impressions. Smile, eye contact, and even if you're thinking, even if you disagree with somebody, make sure that you can look at your body language on the video and adjust accordingly. Do not terrorize somebody over video. I've said so much. Is there somebody who wants to speak? Have a 1 minute airtime down to 5 minutes. How many would want to address the others? Please don't leave us yet, because we still have a quick 10-second survey that we'd like you to respond to. But let's maximize the next 5 minutes here. Still going through inputs here in the chat room. Or would somebody want to speak and just share your company practices? Are you using Grow? Or is there any other framework or model that you're using? Apart from what I have covered, I'm sure that I may have missed one or two important things. Please do address your classmates. You're welcome, Gladys. Build first impressions. Some of our leaders who are in video calls have already established that reputation of easily angered or always frowning or doesn't know how to smile. And that's magnified in video calls. So if you're also not very conscious, you can't control your body language, you may just opt for an audio call. Waiting for some more questions or responses here. Again, going back to the point of Pearl on team coaching, that's also a powerful combination of one-on-one conversations or team conversations and team meetings. Make sure that your team coaching or team conversations really addresses that team needs, and everything else that's individual can be taken offline. So the skill of the leader in determining, okay, team need, let's continue. Individual need, let's just have a one-on-one conversation here. especially the tip rip principle. You don't want others to get to know some behavioral issues by one person. The only exception to discussing an individual's behavior issue or performance lapse in front of everyone else is when you want to make team members accountable to each other. Let me spend some more time on that. When you want to make the other team members feel that you are holding somebody accountable, then you can do that in a group setting. But you have to be careful that you're being perceived as taking things personally, because others also don't want to be a witness to you lambasting somebody in public. But if you call out somebody in front of others, especially those affected by the poor performance or behavioral issue, the others will appreciate it. Pearl mentioned that they use Grow in her organization, that's SGS Co Asia Pacific, and you have a coaching certification program. You don't let leaders coach if they have not been certified to do so. Great. Global companies have that. A lot of outsourcing companies employ that. Big local companies have also something similar in place. Grow is really a global model, but regardless of the structure, you may rename it. Some are also using modified versions of Grow called in different ways. They just change the wordings and therefore a new acronym. That is still the structure. You still have to have all the other 7 principles in place. Nobody wants to speak. Nobody wants to share. Inviting others, we still have 1 minute to go. Then preparing to answer our quick 10-second survey in the offers feature of your webinar. Please keep questions and inputs coming. I will start to wrap up. Thank you for being here, especially for our groups who have joined us since yesterday, our delegation from IBS Electronics, Pearl of SGS is still here, Cheche of Transcom, Josie of Inspiro, Chow of Inspiro is also here with us. Our friends from Rebisco have also joined us. And some of our newly introduced participants to LJMB seminars. Continue investing in your personal and professional development. Please follow us in LJMB training in our FB page for announcements of future webinars. And please answer the quick 10-second survey on the offers feature of this webinar screen. It's been great to have you. Please share the lessons and become better coaches and motivators of our leaders during these times when it counts most. Please do answer our quick 10-second survey in the offers page of our webinar. You're welcome, Cheche. You're welcome. Others are now saying thank you. Should you have further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. For my personal and professional network, please send me a message in Facebook or in LinkedIn or send me an email, anything specific. I'll answer as part of my commitment to continuous coaching to our participants. Thank you to those who participated in the chat room. Gladys, thank you. Josie and Pearl and the mentioned Cheche. Beth has to log out soon. Johanna, thank you for being able to resume. I heard that you have some connectivity issues. Manoj, thank you for joining here. Ciao, bien. Bien, you're with us. Oli, it's 2:31, still plugging with those who are still with us here. The quick 10-second survey. Yes, Bien, thank you for really dedicating time and resources so that you make the most out of this lockdown. Waiting for perhaps a few more comments. If not, please go to offers page and answer our quick 10-second survey. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday plugging our free webinar tomorrow. You may join us in our free webinar tomorrow. And tomorrow we'll talk about what's next in this long COVID journey, a preview of what's happening or about to happen in the next 18 months. Next week, our webinars will focus more on sales. If you're an entrepreneur or a sales manager who has low sales or no sales at all, join us in our sets of learning sessions next week. It's really been a challenge for organizations to push their products and services. Revenue is really badly impacted. So next week, we're dedicating our webinars for the theme for entrepreneurs, businessmen, senior executives, and sales managers. How do we, or what do we do if we have low sales or no sales at all? Promoting our quick 10-second survey and our attendees. Thank you as well, Vida. See you in our future webinars. Next week, there are 2 free webinars and exciting topics on what to do. There's also the first Tagalog or Filipino version of Resiliency 2.0. So we'll post that in our Facebook page. 2:35 by my time. Enjoy the rest of the day and the week. And have a great weekend this Saturday and Sunday. Stay at home. Let's help flatten the curve and really serve as leaders to our people during these tough and dark times. Louis Banta and LJMB signing out.